We've got another very interesting New York Rangers trade report to take a look at here today, as once again the New York Rangers are linked to a player, and this time it is a defenseman on the San Jose Sharks that the Rangers may possibly look to trade for, as they might want to upgrade the defense core once again, as they already went out there and of course shipped out Keandre Miller, sent him over to the Carolina Hurricanes, where the Rangers got back some phenomenal value, being a first and second round pick plus a higher-end defense prospect in Scott Morrow, who is NHL ready as well, who's already got some experience playing in the NHL and AHL, and also had some quite incredible numbers offensively in the AHL as well for a defenseman. But basically, they got back some great value, including a really good higher-end NHL-ready defense prospect who is right-handed in Scott Morrow. And they also went out there and picked up arguably, and I would definitely say the top defenseman available in this kind of free agent class, and it is, of course, Gavrikov, who ended up getting picked up, the former LA King defenseman there, on a 7-year deal worth $7 million per season. I think that cap hit was quite incredible when you take a look at the kind of rest of the market there, and a guy like, for example, Ivan Provorov of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He re-signed back there with an $8.5 million cap hit, so you take a look at that cap hit there and compare it to what Gavrikov got, and him being a better defenseman just in general. I mean, I think it's pretty straight up there. Gavrikov is a better player than Provorov, and him getting $1.5 million less on his cap hit, I think is quite incredible there. So we have already seen this Rangers team make a couple kind of upgrades there. You know, Scott Morrow was just a really nice kind of piece added in there for the kind of short and long-term future probably. And the massive upgrade we saw was adding in Vladislav Gavrikov, the former LA Kings defenseman, who was definitely going to be a massive upgrade over someone like Ryan Lindgren, for example, who has been, alongside Adam Fox on that top pair for, quite a few years now, where now we're getting in a guy like Gavrikov. And I definitely think there is a clear, massive gap between those two players' kind of, impact level, their talent level. So I think adding in a guy like Gavrikov was a major upgrade, which was needed, but maybe the team wants to go out there and make another upgrade somewhere on the defense side of things, and maybe they want to add in a guy by the name of Mario Ferraro, who I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with that name, because the Rangers have been linked to this player for season after season after season after season now. It feels like, I feel like it's been at least like 4 or 5 years now where we have consistently kind of been hearing this name linked to the Rangers there. Like I said, he's been someone who has been kind of rumored to possibly being dealt for quite some time now. He's still been on San Jose for this entire time, and of course, maybe this is the offseason or time that we do actually see him traded away. The San Jose Sharks are definitely a team, though, that are, of course, I think probably looking to make some kind of defensive additions there. I don't think they want to get too much weaker on the back end there with where they're at right now. They have so many great kind of young forwards coming up there, but they're lacking a slight bit on the defensive side of things. So maybe they do want to kind of reinforce the defensive side of things a little bit there. So they probably don't want to, ship out Mario and then just take back a really kind of bad defenseman. But I do think some kind of a trade package with a guy like Carson Susi going out the door for Mario Ferraro could make a bit of sense there. And really the only way I see that happening is if the Rangers think there is a real kind of upgrade to be had there by picking up a guy like Ferraro over Susi, which, could make sense there. And they do have identical contracts as well. They both have 1 year left with a $3.25 million cap hit. So that, first off, makes things quite easy there and seamless, where you can just pretty much, have a 1-for-1 trade there where the Rangers are maybe giving up an extra pick or prospect. I can't imagine that the San Jose Sharks would be willing to do, 1-for-1 straight up Ferraro for Susi, but I think you could pretty much do a seamless kind of 1-for-1 swap with the Rangers, maybe adding on a little bit of an extra asset to go alongside Susi to acquire Ferraro, who is a younger and I would say probably better defenseman for sure. I think with what we saw from Susi with the Rangers this past season there, obviously things did not go great. And I think, yes, he wasn't good, but the rest of this team for the most part there, especially defensively, wasn't great. So I don't put all that blame on Susi there. And especially with having a full kind of offseason now, And this team having made some serious upgrades on the defensive side of things as well, I think this team is in a much better spot overall, not just defensively, but just as a team in general. This team does, I think, look a lot stronger than, the end of last season, even, for example. So I think with where this team is at right now, with a full offseason, they're under a new head coach as well. And sometimes that can give a team a bit of a boost there, having that new head coach there, the kind of fresh voice, I guess, in the locker room. Maybe that can be a massive help and change for this team. So I think overall, this squad should be a lot better, and having that full offseason now with the new coach and stuff like that, and having added a guy like Gavrikov there, which I think having a guy like that in your team in itself is going to be such a big importance and kind of major kind of difference from what we saw last season there. So I just think the moves that we have made so far this offseason have been really good, especially that Gavrikov one. So I think Susi very well might end up staying on this team, and I'm not completely against that. I understand why fans, maybe want to see him dealt away because there were some major struggles with him on this team last season, but I just think he is going to be quite a bit better. I think he is a kind of, higher tier kind of third pairing defenseman. I think that's kind of what he is. He's not quite a kind of full on every single day kind of second pairing defenseman in my opinion, but I think if he is kind of on your third pair, you're looking pretty good there. If he's on your second, you're not kind of loving that. So in this scenario here, we'll take a look at the end of the video, probably some defense pairs with maybe a guy like Mario Ferraro on the team if he does get traded for, but I just think that there probably isn't a massive difference between the level of impact a guy like Ferraro or Susi is going to have on this possible Rangers team, but I just think at the end of the day, if they do have a kind of inkling on maybe keeping a guy around for a bit more longer term, maybe they would rather go with a guy like Mario Ferraro over someone like Susi, as, Ferraro was still only 26 years old, right? He's still in his mid kind of 20s there. He is turning 27, I guess, in September, but he's still on the kind of younger side of things there. 6 foot, about 209-pound defenseman, solid defensive guy. He may not be the biggest player in the world, but he is quite physical and blocks a lot of shots there. This past season had 125 block shots, 150 hits. The season before that had 195 block shots. So he blocks a lot of shots there, hits a ton, is pretty physical. Obviously, he has been on a pretty terrible San Jose Sharks team for his entire NHL career. So I think maybe picking up a guy like Ferraro and getting him in a different environment there could really be a massive kind of help for his development there, because this is someone who I think could end up being a kind of solid or decent second pairing defenseman. I think that's kind of what he can be on a better team. Obviously, he's been on a pretty terrible San Jose Sharks team where he has consistently been getting over the last kind of 5 years or so now, like well over 21 minutes per night. So he's averaging a lot of ice time there. He's got that experience, of course. He's never been in the playoffs, so that's the one kind of negative, I guess. But I think he's a pretty solid kind of all-around defenseman and doesn't have a crazy kind of offensive game, but just a solid kind of reliable defensive defenseman there. Brings some toughness, physicality. May not be the biggest guy in the world, but I do think could be a pretty decent upgrade, possibly over someone like Susi. Although, like I said, I don't think there's going to be a major kind of difference there, but I would definitely give the edge to someone like Ferraro over Susi. So if they were able to go out there and send off a lower tier prospect or pick and go out there and make that kind of swap there to get Ferraro over someone like Susi, I would definitely be okay with that. But if they did decide to just kind of stick things out here and go with Susi, I can understand that as well, because we have seen Susi and Borgen, like, for example, when they were on the Kraken, I believe it was, together, right? They had a good amount of runs, so there has been some kind of connections there with Borgen and Susi, so maybe they want to kind of give that a bit of a longer run this upcoming season. We'll have to wait and see, but either way, they're going to have some options out there, and I do think Susi, him around long term for the rest of this season at least, may not be the absolute worst thing in the world, because I do expect him to be much better than what we saw from him last season. And next up here, let's say the deal actually does happen and we see the Rangers trade Carson Susi and a low-tier prospect / pick for Mario Ferraro. And like I said, them having identical contracts, 1 year left with a $3.25 million cap hit, it does make a possible deal somewhat, simple, because you can just have their contracts kind of match up perfectly, and you're just probably having to give up an extra asset if you're the Rangers to make this deal happen. But let's take a look here at two kind of different possible kind of defense pair combinations here that I have if the Rangers were to acquire Mario Ferraro via a trade. So let's take a look here. First off, I have for the top pair, Gavrikov and Fox, which is the same for both of these. But then for the second pair, this is where things can kind of switch up. So I have for the first option, Schneider and Borgen. And then for the third pair, Ferraro alongside Morrow. And I have this because You've got Scott Morrow, who is more of the kind of offensive guy, and I do think Morrow is a pretty solid two-way defenseman, but I think he is slightly, maybe a little more towards the offensive side of things there, which is not a bad thing at all, but putting him alongside the more defensive guy in Ferraro definitely could make a lot of sense there. He may not be the biggest defenseman in the world, but he is quite tough, physical, obviously having 150 hits last season there, 125 block shots. He hits a lot. He blocks a lot of shots, plays a good defensive game, has experience eating up a lot of minutes there, consistently 5 seasons in a row now of playing 21 kind of plus minutes per night there, a couple being over 22. So this is someone who's eaten up a lot of ice time there, has played a lot of hockey, and I'm sure we chomping at the bit there to get some playoff experience. So him coming to this team there would probably just kind of add to his kind of hungriness, I'm sure, to kind of want to make the playoffs, which would not be a bad idea to kind of have that alongside a kind of younger, inexperienced player in Scott Morrow. So I think that could be a pretty interesting kind of third pair there, Morrow alongside Ferraro. And then you've got for the kind of second option there, I have for the top pair, like I said, the same thing. Of course, being Gavrikov alongside Fox. But then for the second pair, I have Ferraro alongside Borgen. And then for the third pair, Schneider alongside Morrow, which I definitely think could be a pretty interesting kind of combination as well. Ferraro, I think, is capable of kind of being in a second pairing kind of role. I think on a Stanley Cup winning team, maybe you would rather him be on that kind of third pair, but I do think he is capable of being in the second pair for sure. He's a solid defenseman, and going alongside Borgen, two kind of, just solid, more defensive defensemen there. But, Borgen's got a bit of a two-way game there possibly. So I think that could be a pretty solid kind of second pair combination. It may not be a kind of, high-end kind of second pair in the entire NHL, but I think it'd be a pretty kind of decent defensive kind of shutdown kind of second pair there, which would not be bad at all. Two just solid defensemen. Nothing too crazy with these guys, but just too solid, for the most part, reliable, more defensive defensemen, which I think going alongside each other would not be the worst thing at all. Anyways, that's pretty much going to do it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post every single day a video at 10 a.m. Eastern time about the New York Rangers. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on possibly picking up a guy like Mario Ferraro from the San Jose Sharks in a trade, which would have to pretty much see Carson Susi go out the door. So would you be willing to see the Rangers trade away a guy like Susi and a pick/prospect to go out there and make a bit of an upgrade for Ferraro? Would you rather see him stick with Susi? Would you rather see him pick up Ferraro and, give him an extension there because he is, still only turning 27 and, on the younger side of things, there could be a bit of a longer term piece for this team? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll catch you in the next one, and let's go Rangers.